So I got to do both these passages at the same time. So we're going to end up 17 plus about 20 more, about 37 miles this chunk. All kinds of neat old history about the superstitions, you know, the lost Dutchman gold mine and Weaver's Needle and all kinds of neat stuff going on in there. Yeah, a lot of this country has neat old mining history into it, you know, a lot of it does. Yeah, thinking of an old family story. I was just young. We were living in a place called Garden Valley, Idaho at the time. I was working with Sherry's father and mother in the saddle shop they had in those days, doing work as an apprentice for them, mostly doing artwork on saddles and such. Seems like a whole nother lifetime ago. I'm trying to think how old I would have been. I don't know, must have been about 25 maybe, something like that. Pretty young. We had 3 children, right. Well, it was summertime, it was nice. And we thought, oh, we need to get out. Take the kids for a hike. Well, one of the kids was just a little baby, he wasn't going anywhere. The next older one was a 2-year-old. Maybe she was 6 or 7. I'm not sure. So anyway, we decided we're going to go to this hot springs that's up the river. All right, so we piled in the car, got all the stuff. We're just going to go for one night. It's like a 2-mile hike from the end of the road there up to this hot springs called Moondipper Hot Springs. I love hot springs. Hot springs are great. So anyway, we get up there, and it's kind of one of those really sultry, hot, humid afternoons where you just feel like something's gonna happen, you know. You feel like something's gonna happen, but we didn't know anything was gonna happen. I don't think in those days you even had weather forecasts that tried to tell that kind of stuff. But we get up there, I don't know, we probably get there about noon. We spend the whole afternoon hiking 2 miles up there, get to the hot springs. And by then it's really got that feeling, you know, where you just know something's gonna happen. Like you're gonna have a pretty serious something. You just don't know exactly what it is. And clouds all up, sky gets all dark, you know, this and that. Pretty soon you're pretty aware that it's going to turn into a thunderstorm, right? So we were playing in the hot spring. It's getting darker and darker. And I thought, okay, well, let's go get ready for this because it's coming, you know. And so we got camp all set up. And as we started to get camps, we're just about done setting up camp. I don't even think we had a tent with us. I think we had like a tarp to hang over us or something like that. I'm not sure. In those days we weren't as well geared up as we are nowadays. Anyhow, you could hear it coming up the canyon from below. My, oh my, what a deal. It sounded like a freight train, you know. Lots of noise, huge wind, and trees started coming down, you know, around us up there, you know. You could hear it just up on the mountains. You could hear them coming down. They weren't right beside you, but near enough that it was scary, right? And so I said, you know what, this idea that we got for camping is not going to work. So I went and found a tree that had been hit by another tree and was bent over, so it made kind of like a shelter underneath of it, but like a whole tree, you know, on top. And we got all underneath of that and put the tarp, you know, spread it out over us instead of under us. Put all the You know, got everybody bundled up as best we could. And my goodness, what a storm. Now, in those days we didn't know of this, but since then they have taken to calling those things microbursts. Kind of like really like a tornado in a way. It literally took down all kinds of trees all around us, and I mean big trees, not just little ones, and I mean live trees, not just dead ones. We're talking, literally there were trees as much as 4 feet at the butt that came down around us. It was amazing. There were trees down, there were limbs down, there was all kinds of stuff falling all around us for like, I don't know, 3 hours that night probably. It was crazy, crazy, right? So anyway, rough night, sleep it off as much as we can. Nobody was comfortable, you know, underneath that little tree. And get up the next morning. What had taken us, you know, 2.5 hours to hike in took us 3/4 of the day to hike out because we had to climb over and under trees that were down in the trail, huge trees, like trees that had fallen down, and they were like this big, you know, like 5-foot trees. Of course, the little kid, Josh, the 2-year-old's having a blast crawling over and under things, right? And the older kids enjoying all of this too, climbing over and under things. And so I'm the only one that's going, wow, this is crazy, you know? And so we work our way all the way back to the place where we had parked at a place called Boiling Springs. And I get down there and there's this, there's a Forest Service person waiting for us, asking how many more people are up the, where I was, you know. They were concerned that people were hurt, right? Well, it turns out that the place where we had parked our car, they were literally had taken down almost every single tree in that whole campground. I mean, there were just a few trees that were still standing. The whole river, literally, you couldn't see the water in the river because the river was full of trees. Now, this isn't a big, huge river. It's maybe about 30 feet wide, 25 feet wide, maybe 1.5 feet, 2 foot deep. But literally, the thing is, you don't even see the water anymore. There's so many dead trees in there, it's crazy. They didn't have the road open because there were so many trees down in the road for us to go out, so they'd open up another road in an area where there hadn't been near as much of a storm. But in order to get to that point, we had to drive out of the campground. And by the way, mine was the only car in the campground that didn't have a tree on it or have trees down behind it that could get out, right? So I was the only guy who could leave. Everybody else, their cars were all smashed, right? In fact, there was a guy that got hurt in his camper. Tree fell on the camper, messed him up. And so anyway, we get in the car, we drive, and these guys have been working all morning trying to get the campground free of trees. It's literally, they've got them cut off the trees. They've fallen all across the road, and they're stacked up like cordwood, you know, like 7-8 feet above the ground. They got them all cut off, so you're just driving through this little lane of cut off trees, right? On both sides, just barely wide enough to drive your car through. And that went on, they had that about, I don't know, they had about 200 or 300 yards of that. And then we got up on the mountain and it hadn't happened there. And so we managed to get out that way. It was a heck of a deal, you know, seriously. It's like, whoa, this is kind of bad. You know, we were not really thinking it was so bad. It was sort of bad where we were, but it got down to the campground. It was like crazy. So anyway, we drive all the way around the long way because they've got the main road shut because of all the trees down. It took them like a week to get it open. Anyhow, I get home and I live on that same road, just you know, about 15 miles or 20 miles down the way. I get down there, and of course my wife's sitting there going, "Are you guys okay?" They were really worried, you know. There were helicopters going up and, rescuing people that had got hurt in these, like I say, there was one guy that got smashed in a camper. He wasn't killed, but he was injured. And then of course all of the different, so there was emergency vehicles going up and down the road, light alarms and lights and garbage all night long, you know. So she was a little worried about us when we got home, but we got home safe. And then over the next, we lived right by the main road, so we could see all of what was going on. And over the next, I don't know, week, it's probably the next week, 5-6 days, something like that. Basically, they got the road open, and then they started bringing out all the cars, you know. Some of them they were towing out, smashed. Some of them were on car trailers because you couldn't even tow them, you know. I mean, they were messed up. Like RVs, you know, up there that had got crushed. Trailers that had been behind trucks or something that had been parked in the campground that had been smashed, hauling them out. It was like a wreck. So at any rate, I learned what a microburst was that way. And by the way, that's kind of a crazy thing, a microburst. They say nowadays, I didn't really know too much about that in those days. They just thought it was a big thunderstorm, which it is. They say nowadays that a microburst actually is a lot like a tornado. The only difference is, of course, there's no funnel cloud because microbursts happen up in the mountains, right? You can't get a tornado in the mountains because the mountains are there. It prevents it from organizing enough to do that. But yeah, so there's an old story. An old family story. I don't even know. I'm sure Sarah can remember it. Josh, probably not so much. I know when I was 2 and things happened, you remember the stories that everybody's told about it, and you think you remember it, which, you know, it's as good as you get sometimes when you're 2. We did have a lot of fun in the hot spring. Had a good afternoon before it turned into a storm. And then we have the kind of what do they call it? There's type 2 fun, right? Type 1 is when you're giddy and happy and everything's going great. And then type 2 fun is when it's really not all that good. It's sort of hard, difficult, and you're having a hard day. But later on, it's the kind of things you remember. You know, type 2 fun, you remember that the rest of your life. Type 1 fun, that stuff goes away within a week. Don't even remember that stuff. So, we don't go looking for type 2 fun generally. Some people do. I'm a little bit like that. Flying paragliders, it can be type 2 fun sometimes. It can be type 2 fun. Yeah, flying paragliders was crazy. But hiking in microbursts, that's crazy too. Now I volunteered to fly paragliders, but not microbursts. I wouldn't do that again. But it's the stories, it's the things it's the kind of experiences that make for old stories for old guys, right? Yeah.